Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Perspective Philosophy, where we try to better our perceptions of the world through philosophical discussion. Today's episode should be quite an interesting one. I have a response video made to me by Eisel Mazard. I can't say his YouTube name, Abbas. Eisel Mazard. And too uncultured for any of that. And essentially, he's giving me some advice. For me and his daughter. I don't know why. But let's get into it. I'm really interested to see the advice that he's given us, especially since the video is titled Nihilism. And as you know, on this channel, I'm clearly a nihilist. Nihilist Marx. I'm a nihilist, postmodern neo-Marxist. And I'm gonna get that tattooed on my chest, just in case anyone was wondering about my metaphysical and ethical beliefs. Anyway, let's just get into the review. Let's just get into it. So it's this video, Nihilism, Advice for My Daughter, and Perspective Philosophy. I don't know why it's to his daughter and me, but I am actually Eisel's daughter. Yes, wicked fatigue. In case anyone was wondering, I don't know if you can tell, but this is what happens when you study philosophy. This is what you turn into. So let's just get into it. I'm really interested to see what he's gonna say. Let's know if the audio's okay.
Because I went to a job interview today. The job pays minimum wage.
Oh, that's kind of shit. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I've had to work minimum wage. It is shit. Actually, I've only ever really. Well, I had one job where I'm not really working minimum wage, and I was getting paid quite well actually. But then I was exploited even more, and I rather preferred the minimum wage job. So it's quite funny. Like, I can't empathize with having to go and apply to a minimum wage job, especially when you're ridiculously overly qualified for it. It's just painful.
And does not require any university diploma. And I'm not gonna get it.
And that right there is why we should be socialists.
I think if they offer it to me, I'd probably have to refuse, to be clear. But
why did you go? Like, why did you go to the interview if you don't want the job? Now you're just spoiling the chances for somebody else and then costing the business money. Like, I don't get it.
Just so you know, had a productive conversation yesterday with a young man. He says he's in his late 20s.
Says he's in his late 20s. He doubts it. I like that. Am I looking young, guys? Is my skin nice? Am I looking like a baby? Am I just a child here? But I think I'm glad he said it was productive conversation anyway. Oh God.
Philosophy, politics, and life. If you're still in your teenage years when watching this, it will probably sound completely meaningless to you to have an older guy like me say, you know what, philosophy, it's not about logic, it's not about abstract reasoning, philosophy is really about life.
Like, okay, I get that, like, philosophy is about life, I understand what he's trying to convey, but philosophy is 100% about logic, and that is why we do it. Like it's about applying logic to life. Like, that's kind of the point. Like to live as Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. When we do philosophy, it is the application of logic and critical thinking to life so that we can live the best life possible, and create the best society possible.
Philosophy is really about how you are going to live your life, how we are going to live our lives. And you know what? Politics. It's not about abstract reasoning. It's not.
That's exactly right. There is why we need socialism.
Not about logic. There's a sense in which politics is not even about right or wrong or correct or incorrect. Politics also, it's really about life. It's really about.
Well, no, politics is also about logic and reasoning as well, which is why we'll have these, like, obviously horrible political figures that control our lives, that prevent us from living any, decent lives in the first place. Remember to seize the means of subscription, guys, because the whole point is that, like, when we look towards our political leaders, like, they're so full of shit. They're so full of it. Like, I think even Russell Brand recently made a video even commenting on this. Like, when we look at politicians, we have an intuition of just distrust with them because we know that they're trying to, create like their own ends and like, fulfill their own interests and not ours. Well, politics in the first place is supposed to be an extension of ethics, which is why you have, Aristotle saying, which is what Aristotle basically promoted 2,000 years ago. And I think that's basically what politics should be. It should be about, like, if ethics is how I live my life, politics is how we should live our lives.
But how you're going to live your life, how we're going to live our life. I understand. If you're 19 years old hearing this, it sounds complete bullshit to you. All right?
I don't know, man. Like, as a 19-year-old, I was studying philosophy at uni. I'm pretty sure I was 19 when I started. So, like, I don't know.
When you say this is about living my life, are you talking about which bakery I go to buy my bread? Are you talking about, going skateboarding in your spare time? Like, whatever it is you like. I understand when you're a young person.
I feel like I feel like in that sentence, he's almost accused me of being like a French skater. What bakery do you get your bread? By the way, which skate park do you go to?
What you think of as life and what that means to you, it's something quite different from what it means to middle-aged people.
That's
like
true,
myself.
I suppose.
There's another bias that creeps into all of this discourse about philosophy, discourse about politics, the discourse about taking philosophy and politics and life and putting them together and getting something out of it, getting something out of the next 5 years.
I mean, like, I remember getting told, like, we should have an innate distrust for politicians as philosophers. And I think the point is that politics is supposed to be, like, the practical application of philosophy, and, like, political philosophy. Unfortunately, it obviously gets tied into these, like, vested interests and stuff. But that's what politics really should be. And someone was telling, like, putting philosophy, politics, and life together. Well, it should never have been separated. And I think Vico talks about that when he talks about the notions of perverse philosophy being separate from our life, and we start talking about like abstract reasoning and stuff like that. And you do get these perverse philosophies, so I get what where he's coming from. But I'd like to think any like good philosopher doesn't really, divest those things.
Of your life, for example. There's a very strange bias that creeps in depending upon at what age you got involved in the game, right? So, some people start reading about communism when they're like 12 years old, all right? There are red diaper babies. There are people who...
Red diaper babies, I like that. I'm gonna get my communist child like going at the age of 6 at the very latest. If they aren't capable of reciting the works of Karl Marx by the age of 10, then I'm just expelling them from the household.
Who were raised with communism from birth. And there are people who, like, at the end of high...
I understand. I would like to point out that as well, from what Eisel has said in his previous videos and stuff, that he was actually raised by communists and that it was not a good experience in light of, like, communism, I think. In overall, like, his understanding of communists seemed to be quite bad anyway. But ultimately, I don't know if he has like a negative like association with his like the way he's been raised with communism. And so I'd like to say, like, if that's the case, like, I hope it wasn't forced down your throat or anything like that, Eisel.
High school, their last year, they haven't even heard these terms. I think I've told this story before. I had a history professor at university, and he said he had a student come up to him at the end of a lecture. So this is a university level lecture, and he said, during the lecture today, you mentioned World War II. So does that imply there was some other war before that? This was a white, English-speaking Canadian, born and raised in Canada. He had literally never heard of World War II before. He had literally never heard of World War I before. He was at university level.
That's insane. But I mean, like, I guess it happens. Tragic that anyone hadn't heard about World War I and II, I suppose.
There are people who get involved in politics late. There are people who start thinking about philosophy late in life. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, they bring a very detached, mature perspective to politics, but getting all the way. And there are people who form really deep, sentimental, and emotional connections to concepts, to words, to historical figures, because they get involved with this stuff early. You know, look, there are
Well, no, man. Like, look, like I get it. Like, no one wants to raise a child like John Stuart Mill was raised to be like a utilitarian robot by the age of 11. But I am very glad the world has had John Stuart Mill, for example, and that he was raised in that way because he managed to basically. I mean, he got to the point where he just took Benthamite like utilitarianism apart. He's like, this doesn't work. We're going to basically have to make something different, and like. The whole point of like don't get me wrong, like introducing someone to a political a particular thought and a particular like ideology young may be destructive, but introducing someone to philosophy and critical thinking young is nothing but beneficial. Why does it keep doing that?
There are advantages to getting involved early. There are advantages to becoming a well-educated person early in life rather than like, there are also disadvantages. To help you visualize this, Buddhism.
My God, how many? Oh, 2 ads. This is down with the capitalists.
Imagine a 30-year-old man who's barely heard of Buddhism. He's seen it in some kung fu movies. He has no familiarity with Asian culture, Asian languages, or Buddhism.
I like that.
And in his 30s,
be like what?
He starts to get interested for the first time. And he walks to the library to get out some books on Buddhism, and he walks to a Buddhist temple and has a conversation with a Buddhist monk. He is going to show up with a rational, mature attitude towards Buddhism. Even just implicitly, he is going to be demanding that Buddhism live up to his expectations as a rational, well-educated, middle-aged man. He's going to be looking at these books, he's going to be talking to this monk, and like without even making a conscious effort.
Well, then again, he could come with an ideological bias that, like, he could be in an existential crisis and be seeking anything that would just alleviate that. And so he might turn up to Buddhism and be like, yes, finally, something that will free me from my crippling depression. Throw himself into it, like, ideologically, and then just become, like, like the most Buddhist, like dogmatically Buddhist person ever. Same thing with, like, other religions. I know Buddhism's a bit better, but like if you look at like people who become new, like born again Christians and stuff like that, or convert to Islam or whatever fundamental religion, it happens like people in later life. There might be that just assuming that someone's older doesn't necessarily make them wiser. Even Aristotle talked about that 2,000 years ago. He says like, and don't get me wrong, that man, like Aristotle, is an ancient Greek who idealizes old men like no extent, like to beyond anything. He even says that young men shouldn't be involved in politics, right? But at the same time, he says that just because someone's old, it doesn't necessarily, or older, it doesn't necessarily make them wiser. It doesn't mean that they've had the experience in life to give them the education necessary to, give them an ideological insight into what is actually best. And that's something that we need to consider, right? Like we need to consider the fact that like people when they approach different theories and different ideologies, just because of their age, aren't going to necessarily approach it any better than anyone else. I mean, one of the things I think, Eisel, I think you're a fan of like Nietzsche, aren't you? And I think you've mentioned Nietzsche quite a few times, at least in a way that you would at least maybe be respective of the figure. And I think we all, no matter our positions on Nietzsche, I mean, I'm not a fan of the man myself, but I can at least admit he was a very intelligent, capable man, and most of his writing was done at a very young age. He was a university professor at the age of 24. He was a genius and he offered a lot to the world, some good, some bad things, and ultimately has had a great deal of influence. I would argue that people like Nietzsche, people who are engaged from a very, young age in philosophy, as you say, can have a great deal of insight, even from the fact that they're not ideologically as embedded within the culture and maybe ideologically as biased towards the culture, which is why you seem to see people who are below the age of 35 are much more likely to change their political views, or more likely to engage with different forms of thought. So it does seem to say that someone of a certain age may approach it more rationally, but someone of a certain age may approach it also more dogmatically.
There's like a filter there. He is going to be filtering out purely superstitious, purely affective.
I wish that was the case. It's just not.
Elements of okay, this is real anthropological jargon. Purely performative aspects of religion. Ritual is not. He's not going to, in his 30s, show up and say, you know what? I need a magical ritual to make me feel better about having a broken arm. You know, they do that in Buddhism. It's a real example. You know, he's not.
Well, that's nonsense, because they might actually turn up and be like, I really need this magical ritual to make me feel better. And that's like the, you know, maybe an aspect of expressing their spirituality in order to overcome like existential crisis. And I mean, Hegel talks about how people like, you know, throw themselves into religion in order to essentially alleviate the responsibility that they have to, you know, create their own ethical duties. And it very much could be like that. I mean, just assuming because someone's 35 or whatever doesn't mean that they're going to approach things in any way different to any other person who's like rational, or any person who's even like just any person really.
I'm not going to show up and say, you know what, I need a ritual to drive the ghosts out of my home. No, right? He's going to be approaching this in a certain way. And he may not be aware of it. And I often see the Buddhist monks and the university professors and so on, and they all react to it without anyone spelling it out. Oh, here's someone approaching where we have to present the religion and the philosophy in this very rational aspect. Okay? What if the same guy had gone to the library and gone to the Buddhist temple at age 16? It's different.
He mightn't be in as much emotional pain, and so might actually approach things more rationally, arguably. I mean, many of what thank you. Many of what issues actually develop in my late 20s. I mean, like, for example, mental health conditions are primarily more likely to develop in your 20s. And the reason for that is because of the stresses of life. I mean, like, one of the arguments is that, you know, schizophrenia wouldn't exist in a less stressful society because it's stress induced, right? And the reality of this is that if someone develops a mental health issue like schizophrenia, or develop a mental health issue like a personality disorder or whatever it may be, it may ideologically blind them to the power structures of that institution, or the things that are trying to, you know, appeal to their emotions rather than their reasoning. And so saying that someone approaches this more rationally just because they're older is just nonsense. Like I mean, like 16-year-olds, like, as maybe naive as they may be, still have the capacity to reason, which is why we're, you know, let them do many things. Like, you know, like the age of consent is 16 years old for like, you know, in the UK, and it's the same age you can join the army. It's also the same age you can go and do A levels. We do give 16-year-olds enough credit to say that they can do certain things, you know, like that's so rational, like so they're not adults yet, but, you know, they're getting there. And saying that they're like incapable of like reasoning would be like nonsense. Whilst someone at the age of 35, they might be capable of reasoning to a greater degree, but they might also have a greater amount of stress and life problems, which have ultimately exacerbated what would be emotional issues, which lead them to ideological bias and, like, you know, grasping straws and like trying to free themselves from their emotional pain, like just by throwing themselves headfirst into dogmatism.
He would have brought something different to it. He would have taken something different from it, and his own desires, his own needs would have shaped the discourse in a very different way. Okay? What if he was born into a Buddhist family? What if he was first engaging with the religion as a child, as a toddler even, right? The engagement with superstition, completely different. The types of questions you're asking and the answers you're being given. When it's your grandmother answering your question, where do people go after they die? And you're a small child and she's an old woman. It's completely different from you're a man in your 30s. And you go in and you ask, hey, you know, I got these books at the library and it says you believe in reincarnation. Tell me, can you explain technically how does this and that happen? What do you believe? Completely different.
No doubt, but it also means that you can maybe have an insider's perspective. So understanding, like, for example, I was raised a Catholic. I'm sorry, Charlie. Careful with yourself. I was raised as a Catholic, and I had a mostly positive experience of being raised a Catholic. I was, I believed in God, very much so, and I would consider myself Catholic until the age of 19, in which case I became more agnostic. I became agnostic. I just basically thought the question was beyond human comprehension, and that was after studying philosophy. And after studying philosophy, I was able to question like maybe my own dogmatism, but also just approach the question differently. And I would still say that the being raised a Catholic has developed my psyche, don't get me wrong, in a certain way. I mean, like we can see that even in the way that mental health issues develop, right? Like, so, like take OCD, you know, obsessive compulsive disorder. When that develops in someone with, let's say, from a Christian background versus someone from a Muslim background, you can have like intrusive imagery or intrusive like thoughts of blasphemy. Now, the way blasphemous intrusive thoughts occur to, let's say, an individual from a Christian background versus an individual from a Muslim background are very different. Blasphemy for a Christian is typically, you know, defiling the cross, you know, basically acting in such a way to, you know, like, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Desecrate, right? Religious artifacts, and you know, say religious anti-religious things, or feel like or like basically feel hatred and anger towards religious sentiments, and wanting and like feeling like and like seeing things that like are anti-religious and blah 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 blah, like satanic and so on like that, right? Whilst blasphemous intrusive thoughts for people who are from like Islam and Judaism, from more fundamentalist religions, are not doing their like prayers right, not performing ritual properly, which shows like a difference in how their psyches have developed, even in relation to people who develop like mental health issues, right? And like it's very interesting. But the whole point of like understanding this is it does, okay, it may shape that worldview, but it also gives them the opportunity to understand that worldview in a way that allows them to negate it. You know, like you get many Christians and Catholics and so on that become atheists because they were raised in that way, whilst you get many like people who are raised without religion then converting, you know, to said religions. And so it's not as straightforward as like you're raised within an ideological system, therefore you're going to be like condemned to face that throughout your whole life. It's not like that. In many ways it can give you the benefit of an insider's perspective.
Experience, right? Yeah. This is a case in which the observer shapes the experience more than they know, right? You're shaping the experience by the questions you're asking, the answers that you're rejecting, the answers that aren't good enough, which books you take off the shelf, the relationships of authority, right? Sometimes that are completely unseen, right? If you got involved with left-wing politics in your 30s, if you got involved with left-wing politics as a teenager, if you were born and raised in left-wing politics, these things shape you in a very different way. But also what you know about left-wing politics and how you feel about left-wing politics will be very different, because you have been shaping the politics and the philosophy at every stage, just as much as, or even more than, our example taken from Buddhism.
Well, I used to be right wing. So, like when I was young, well, I was economically left, socially right. I'm quite embarrassing, unfortunately, but you know, angry teenagers that don't really understand what's going on sometimes, and I can honestly say that was me, right? But like, then I studied philosophy, and I was like, oh shit. And not just that, like I started to get like maybe a greater insight into the world, and you know, I was quite maybe misanthropic from bullying and stuff like that, and I started realizing I was like, don't get me wrong, always anti-racist, that kind of thing, like very much so, but believed that I used to believe that in nationalism very strongly. I used to have a very nationalistic thinking. I used to believe that we needed to outcompete other countries and basically assert British dominance in order to make sure that Britain was safe and secure from foreign invasion, attack, and like political espionage, right? And I also believed that British culture was a bedrock of values which was ultimately beneficial to the world. Okay, now very easy to fall into that kind of thinking because I am working class, like, and that's basically, I think, a very strong working class understanding of how we should behave. Leftward leaning economics, whilst right leaning social politics, right? That was tea. I was expecting coffee. Okay, and essentially. It did shape me in a very particular way. So I can't say that my, for example, my social understandings and even my economic, like the way that I used to approach politics economics in the past was even more rightward leaning. Like I was probably closer to I wouldn't say a liberal. I would say like the Labour Party. In terms of like not maybe like as far left at the most as probably I would probably say about like the 70s Labour, right? Like it's probably where I was like in terms of like economics, right? Nowhere near socialism, but leftward leaning, and that's in terms of economics. Rightward leaning, I was probably closer to like the Lib Dems or something, or like certainly not UKIP or anything like that, but like they're definitely more right leaning. Um, but like it's just one of those things where it has shaped the way I look at the world. Like obviously having coming from that background, I have a bit more of an insight into maybe the mindset of people who are right wing, and I don't see them as necessarily bad people or anything. But because of that, like I can say that yeah, he's right in that respect, that it does shape the way that you look at the world, but it has given us like the ability to like reject certain like modes of thought. Now what I can say is I've went into socialism more in my degree, in my when I started engaging more and more in economics and in politics, socialism just it was right. that's why I'm here, and that's why I do philosophy, because I critically analyze arguments and I follow the right ones. I studied right wing thinkers like Robert Nozick. I studied liberalist thinkers like John Rawls, and I studied left wing thinkers not so much in uni. Like they didn't really teach very much Karl Marx, but I took me time studied people like Karl Marx, Chomsky, so on, and found what actually I would argue that the left-wing thinkers have the far superior arguments, and that's why I went left-leaning. So like yeah, like
believe it or not,
oh my
results
God.
like this can happen without any cosmetic procedure.
Without any cosmetic procedures.
A lot of you people in the audience, young or old, you won't be able to easily relate to my warning when I say to this guy in his 20s again and again, stop thinking in terms of abstractions on a chalkboard. Stop thinking about politics and philosophy like you're drawing a geometric theorem on a chalkboard, and start thinking about how you're going to live your own life, first and foremost.
Yeah, I would say that's why I'm a socialist, because I care about people and I want to live a life that reflects that.
That's right. To some of you, that may sound as trite as a Hallmark card. You don't get the point I'm trying to make here. Okay? Some of you will not really say, do we start with a chalkboard and an abstract theorem in trying to define homosexuality, in trying to come to a clear, concise conclusion?
I know what he's referring to here because he brought it up in the discussion, but that was just a jump. Like you Eisel, you had half of that conversation in your head to just jump from like it's like, do we talk about homosexuality on the chalkboard? Like
the true meaning of being a homosexual, and do we then choose to live our lives trying to satisfy that ideal, trying to live up to it?
Okay, I'm not sure necessarily what he's trying to say there. If the chat
No. Most people progress through stages of uncertainty and conflicted feelings. They may have a period of time where they feel like they're bisexual and then decide that they're gay, or they don't feel that they know, or they think they're completely straight, but then they happen to have one romantic relationship where they fall in love with someone of the same gender and they question their sexuality, right? There's a whole role of desire and ignorance and uncertainty and doubt and self-doubt. And that's how people live through their sexuality, right? And then at some point in that process, at the end of that process, in the middle of the process, they can stop and look at the chalkboard and say, oh, hey, what is the definition of homosexuality?
I think like I get what he's trying to say, like, abstract concepts don't define how we live our life, so on. But then if we're talking about like descriptions and we're talking like, wait, am I homosexual? Right. Well, then you're going to have to understand what that means. Like, to some degree, wouldn't you? Like you try to make this argument like in the debate that we had. And I'd just like to point out, right, the definitions, like, don't get me wrong, can be removed from life, like in some respects, like, and they can be like abstract and seem like irrelevant. But the whole point is that these are the definitions that we self-apply and are applied to our consciousness, and unwittingly are how we live our lives without even realizing it, right? So like, as Lacan says, like, our our unconscious is structured like a language, and it's structured like a language primarily because the way that we divest the world is linguistic. Like we understand the metaphysically, like the different aspects of reality through like certain philosophical, well, through certain linguistic concepts, right? And so this basically functions as a lens from which we, engage in things like our sexuality and the expression of desires, right? So to say that, like, should I look at the chalkboard first or ignore the chalkboard? Like, what is the definition of homosexuality? Well, the point is that anyone who's engaged in sexuality today, like in this day and age, will already understand the concept of homosexuality, will already understand like a variety of different sexual concepts, and which are growing, every day. And that essentially will shape how they approach their lives in the first place before they even go back to that like self-reflective like attitude. Now, the point of the self-reflective attitude is to go like, well, wait a minute. Like, am I attributing something else in regards to, let's say, like homosexuality, right? Am I attributing like a negative aesthetic which is preventing me from living an authentic life, where I'm rejecting an aspect of myself in order to live a life which abides by, let's say, the expectations of my parents in society or something like that? And so the abstract quote unquote analysis of these words and of ourselves can actually end up freeing us from these like dogmatisms that we apply in our lives that ultimately restrict our thinking and our behaviors in a way that might not be justified and ultimately lead us to unhappiness.
And what are my feelings and what are my experiences and then where do I fit? But it's really an afterthought, right? Why does it even matter? So we dealt with it something like this example of a guy, he thinks of himself as heterosexual, he's married to a woman, but he does actually have sexual affairs with men. He only has oral sex with men, he doesn't have anal sex. Should he think of himself as straight or gay or bisexual? This may sound like a...
Yeah, that's basically what he said in the last stream. And I'd just like to say, you should have said that first, because I imagine my audience are absolutely like anyone who did not see the last stream just started. And so we're going to talk about homosexuality now. And it was basically just to show like, the impact of words and so on and whether they're relevant. And like, as I'm saying, is that like the separation of words from like, as in meaning, like, from meaning from action, is nonsensical. In the words of Wittgenstein, language is the limits of our world, right? Now, I somewhat tentatively agree with Wittgenstein with this, but what I would go to say is that there are, parts of our experience that point us towards something which is undescribed and undescribable within language, right? There's the like Hegelian, Lacanian, like, continental like kind of philosophy coming out. But at the same time, most of our experience is linguistic. It's phenomenologically embedded within language, is phenomenologically dependent upon language. And so to divorce ourselves from these definitions and these meanings of how we understand them as a society, and the connotations of having these labels upon us as a society, is important. Like, as he says, and he goes on to say, like in the previous discussion, people will think you're crazy if you say you're a socialist, like a crackpot, no one will take you seriously. And like, people make judgments of whether you're gay, or, like, when you're gay or not, or whether you're gay. And the important thing is to do with this is when we have these abstract analyzable positions where we take that, backseat view and we analyze ourselves in society, and we, engage in hermeneutics and like, ideological investigations, then what we gain is insight into our own bias and subjectivity, which may be preventing us from living in a way that would ultimately bring us happiness and greater well-being, or maybe causing things in a societal sense that are ultimately negative and unethical. For example, the prejudice against homosexuals. By analyzing what it means to, like, what homosexuality means, and then what is being attributed to it, besides the definition, we can analyze whether that attribution, those judgments, are actually justified in the first place. And without that abstract analysis, how else would we come to the conclusions that we have come to, that many of these instances of like prejudice, bias, and ultimately just dogmatism have been undermining the ethical progress of society?
A joke to you. Think about what I'm challenging the guy on the other side to do. Think about what I'm trying to get him to do. I'm trying to get him to realize that he is again and again proceeding from abstract theorems on a chalkboard. He's living his life as if the definition of socialism is something written on a chalkboard.
Am I? Actually, I'm not. But like, The definition of socialism is how we understand it, right? Like it's a like meaning. When we talk about the meanings of words, I've actually got videos on where words get their meaning, and it has to do with life. But like the way I understand socialism is about the dictates of socialism, like the fundamental understandings and these things that are perpetuated by like the various thinkers, but also by the activists and the people who are trying to bring around a socialist state. Like there are certain aspects of socialism which is consistent throughout.
Definition of anarchism, the definition of communism. And then he turns around and looks at the real world. And he's demanding that the real world satisfy this definition.
What I'm demanding is that the real world become a better place. I never said that the real world satisfy any definition. Like the whole point of what I'm engaged within is that, you know, that there are certain aspects of life that are unethical. And actually, funnily enough, he's saying that there's a separation between socialism and reality, right? But yet Karl Marx, right, the son of a factory owner, was analyzing in real time the exploitation of the worker in like throughout Germany and Europe as a whole, right? And it's just such a nonsensical view to say that there is this like ideological detachment from the left and reality, when actually I think that the left is far more engaged in reality and less abstract thoughts and far more particular, more individualistic in terms of talking about the individual's quality of life and how we can better the individual's quality of life, like how the employee is treated in the factory, or how how the struggles of a new mother, or whatever it may be. It's usually the left that are actually commenting upon these things and talking about like the hardships of life within a capitalist state. And that's not something that we're trying to impose socialism upon capitalism. Like, well, why is socialism not fitting here? It's more like, look, like these are some real problems that real people are facing on an everyday basis. What can we do to make these people's lives better? And that's not something so abstract and so empty as like, look, there's the definition of socialists, we should all be that. Like, that's nonsense.
He's demanding of himself. He sees his role in life as living up to these definitions. He's beholden.
No, my role in life is to and the same as everyone's, is to live the good life. It's to try and be ethical and we're all well intentioned, I think, in that respect, but it's trying to work out what the good life is. And when we're trying to work out what the good life is, we have to engage in, as what Gadamer calls Bildung, that like kind of reflective analysis of ourselves, our institutions, our the understanding of reality, and then rationalize what has and has not worked before, and try to take what was good and progress that, and remove what was bad and leave that behind.
Into the definitions, the abstract reasoning on the chalkboard is primary for him, and for me, it's not even secondary. It's less than secondary. It's nothing. Right?
Well, that explains why he doesn't understand what socialism is.
This is a really pragmatic element of nihilism. What is the meaning of homosexuality? What's the point of taking a word like this and describing yourself? What's the point of someone stepping forward?
Oh, yeah, I actually forgot. Like, you're a nihilist, aren't you, Eisel? Like, well, nihilism is, wrong, for one. Nihilistic thinking depends upon a rejection of normativity, which it cannot do so because it ultimately relies upon the normativity and meaning from which it's grounded. But ultimately as well as that, it's also, to be entirely honest with you, probably one of the most damaging ideologies ever. And even Nietzsche talked about the dangers of nihilism. And I think one of the greatest examples is the contemporary state, in which everyone's going into, well, not everyone, but the majority of the population are entering existential crisis. There's a perpetuation of mental health issues, increase of unhappiness, lack of purpose, and that's because of the reduction of ethics and overall ethical analysis of reality.
At their office and telling their coworker that they're gay. All right. It has nothing to do with any definition on any chalkboard or in any dictionary. You got a guy, he wears a nice suit to work every day, he has a female coworker. At first, they just go out to lunch with a group of coworkers, and then the two of them get along and they start going out to lunch, just the two of them. And at some point, he tells her that he's gay. All right. Now, being gay means different things to different people. Maybe this guy, maybe his actual experience is that he's had sex with more women than he has men. Could mean all kinds of things.
But the whole point is what idea is trying to convey linguistically between him and his colleague, right? Or like the whole point of him speaking in the first place is an action-driven process trying to convey meaning to the other agent. And by trying to convey that meaning, he has a certain common experience in which he's trying to share. He's basically trying to give her insight into his own experience, into his worldview. And I would argue that he probably does that fairly accurately. And if he doesn't, and she has, let's say she has the reaction of going like, oh, you're gay, so you only sleep with men. And he's like, well, wait a minute, no, like I've slept with loads of women, like, and I'm attracted to women as well, and that's what he takes gay to mean. And then she's like, well, wait a minute, that's not what I thought gay was. And they start talking about it, and having that foundation of language to like kind of refer to gives them the possibility of having discourse of whether a word was used properly. When we talk about whether a word was used properly, really gives us insight of whether the individual's experience of those words is the same as ours, and how they are divesting metaphysically the world differently from us, which gives us essentially a bridge between our experiences. And that's the value of language, and that's the reason he's trying to convey meaning in the first place.
Right? His actual lived experience of homosexuality, you could get into all the nitty-gritty of it and what he's dealing with now and what his life was like when he was a teenager. And the woman might even be shocked because maybe she's seen on Facebook or on Instagram that in the past he had a girlfriend or something. There are all kinds of, this is human complexity. What's the point of one human being letting another know that they're gay? Obviously, it's going to shape the future of that.
Well, I think the whole point would be, like, for example, like if I was gay and I was talking to a man and I wanted to express sexual interest, but I wasn't sure if he was on the same wavelength, then I might very well convey my sexuality to see how they respond and to see whether they confirm that they are the same sexuality. Like, there is a purpose to words. And I would say sexuality in the terms of ideologically confining yourself into a box from which you say, like, I do X, is ultimately only to give extrinsic value, in that sense of basically giving like a pragmatic value. Like, it allows them to then go and seek other people who are looking for a similar thing, and it allows them to align their purposes and interests with other individuals. It's like, as a vegan, I'm able to convey my my distaste and, well, sorry, not distaste, my moral revulsion for the animal agricultural industry, and align my interests with other activists and other individuals that are looking to change that. And so, like, the value of words is pretty clear. The value of words is allow us to not only align our life goals with other individuals, but allow us to critically analyze our life goals and critically analyze ourselves so that we may discover whether those goals are actually going to bring us our intended goal.
Relationship. She's going to say, oh, okay. She's going to think about him and her relationship with him in a different way. The point is not for the word to give flesh and blood reality to the abstraction written on the chalkboard. The word functions only for me to express something to you about myself.
Well, this is the thing. It does and it doesn't. It's a two-way street, right? The word allows you to understand aspects of yourself which may have been confusing. Like when you talked about earlier, people being, confused about their sexuality, for example. Having a word to understand yourself can give you insight and ultimately give you the ability to ally your experience with other individuals, so that you go, actually, like you start looking, you may Google the word, and then you start like looking at other people talking about it and their experiences, and that allows you to understand yourself in relation to others and how you are experiencing life. Whereas before, you may have been living through you may have not had the word which would allow you to express your will in such a way which would ultimately reflect the information which was lying dormant within you. It was lying ready to be understood, but not understood properly. And, I'm an existentialist. I'm going to say, like, essentially, like, the ways in which we approach life phenomenologically are changed through language, right? Like, phenomenologically, language structures much of our world, and it happens like a twofold process. The word can change our experience, and our experience can be and the experience can change the word, right? And don't get me wrong, It's obviously not a straightforward process, but that's kind of the conceptual application that is constantly being tested through the use of language and judgment as a whole.
If you call yourself a communist, if you call yourself a socialist, you're telling me nothing about communism. You're telling me nothing about the facts of economics or the facts of history. You're telling me something about you. You're telling me something about who you are. What kind of person?
Well, I mean, he kind of are telling you something that about their like economic beliefs. So that's the idea, isn't it? Like you're saying, like, oh well, I don't agree with capitalism. I don't believe in, let's say, the exploitation of the worker. You know, if you use the word communist, especially if you start using words like Stalinist, then you start. I'm going to think, all right, you're a tanky. You know, you want you want a despotical government. You want like a totalitarian state. You want an authoritarian control over the individuals. You probably think that people are incapable of ruling themselves. You might believe in like a vanguard class and all that sort of stuff. And it gives us information of your political beliefs. And by giving us information on your political beliefs, you've given us an information of how you're approaching life, right? The kind of thought patterns that you're engaged within. That doesn't tell me necessarily, obviously, about, you know, how you are going to live your life in the next 5 years. You might decide radically, like the next day, oh, wait, never mind, I was wrong. I'm not communist at all. That's absolutely nonsense. Like, why would I ever believe that sort of thing? But then you are engaging with me in terms of like economics, like identifying yourself as a communist, as a capitalist, or whatever it is giving me information about you in light of something else. It's like, okay, now I know how you approach this object, and the object is namely economics and how social interaction should be essentially like regulated in our distributionary system. Like, you are giving me information about economics in relation to you.
Person you are, above all else, ethically. You're telling me also about what kind of person you want to be, what you're going to do in the future, what kind of difference in the world you're trying to make. It is just self-expression.
No, I see that. Like, this is the thing. Like, this is the nihilistic kind of thinking coming out. Like, everything's just purely expressive. There is no meaning in just like, you know, no meaning which is grounded. You know, like everything is just expressive. Okay, it's just emotive. What a load of shit. In that case, the word nihilism is meaningless, and the arguments for it are also meaningless. So I don't care.
Self-expression. There's no question of trying to satisfy a perfect definition of communism or a perfect definition of socialism. And it is not just the case that it's pointless for someone like him, this younger man I was talking about. It's not just the case that it's pointless for him to engage in this tit-for-tat game of saying, well, how precisely do you define communism? And for him to then claim that the ideals of communism or the economic system of communism are not besmirched by the real world experience of what happened in the Soviet Union.
Well, of course, and the propaganda that was perpetuated by, you know, the West, and the hatred of communism by capitalists and fascists, which ultimately allied themselves with each other to try and fight a growing communist threat in like Eastern Bloc and so on like that. Like obviously, but then obviously, are we gonna like take the real world experience of people who in Britain voted for a left-wing government from 1945 to 1950 after having fought a world war alongside with the communists? Like, the respect for communists grew a great deal when they saw Russians as their ally, and so, like, don't get me wrong, it's no doubt like obviously real world experience like ideologically is ideologically significant to how people understand words. As I said, experiences can change how we approach words, and one of the primary things is like propaganda and like even real life experiences. But ultimately, what we need to question is whether our judgments are justified or not, and whether that gives us the right information or not. Most people don't like veganism. Most people approach veganism from this carnist standpoint, where they've been raised to eat meat, where they believe they need to eat meat, where it's natural, normal, and necessary, right? And not only that, it's they then see the word vegan as some... Jesus Christ. I would just go away, this bloody infection. Natural, normal, and necessary. Or they may see veganism as mad, as crazy, as absurd, right? And more often than not, that's what you're met with when you talk to people about veganism. And so you can't see how people get dogmatic and like ideologically confined. The issue is if people don't question this ideological confinement through either abstract thinking, like theoretical Bildung in the words of Gadamer, or practical Bildung by engaging in reality and seeing whether it's correct or not, engaging with people on the left and so on, then people become locked into like a nonsensical way of thinking, essentially a thinking which is self-justified and absurd. And that's essentially what we want to avoid as a whole in life. And that's the whole value of philosophy. And what I would say in case of veganism, in the case of, communism, socialism, that kind of thing, is what we need to think about is what are the people who are preaching communism trying to achieve? What are they trying to actually bring around? What kind of state is it? And is it justified or not? What do I want to see the world look like in the next so many years? Because it has relevance to the lives of everyday individuals. Now, that is essentially what I would say we should be engaged within. And that's not abstract, like detached thinking. That's more hermeneutic and grounded.
Or communist China under the dictatorship of Mao Zedong, right? That is not harmless. Right? That is not harmless. Anyone who meets him and listens to him saying that, who sees him playing those games on the chalkboard, right? They're going to react to that the same way I react when I meet someone on the internet who starts putting forward claims about the relationship between race and IQ.
Well, I mean, funnily enough, like I had race realists pop into chat, like I think was it 2 streams ago now, and I was arguing with them and how they were full of shit. Really, I think race realism's disgusting because I engage with reality. I understand that it's not only untrue, but it's also then used to justify like the unethical treatment of other races and promote white supremacy. It's disgusting. Absolutely find it like repulsive. Now I do so because I'm an individual who cares about equality, and that is exactly the same reason why I'm a socialist.
When I meet someone on the internet who starts putting forward the theory that an extraordinary number of Jewish people have won the Nobel Prize for the following reasons, when I meet someone on the internet putting forward the theory that the Buddha had blonde hair and blue eyes, all the time people raise questions and make factual assertions and open up lines of political and philosophical argument. And they are not explicitly telling you that they're a neo-Nazi. They're not explicitly telling you that they're all alt-right and spend all their time reading crazy alt-right conspiracy theories. They may even just make statements about the history of the Roman Empire or the history of ancient Egypt. Like seriously. But if you know your stuff, if you know this material, right away you can tell, whoa, this person is making an excuse for something.
Oh, not again.
Only neo-Nazis and alt-right people make excuses for. This person is engaging in something that reflects what they've been reading, where they come from in terms of their intellectual background, right? And that's who this person really is, all right? So this young man, when he is playing games in this way with...
Can someone tell me what games I've been playing? Like, I mean, except for Fall Guys. Like, I never have time to play games, man. If you check out my other streams, I've been saying this for a while. I really want Cyberpunk. I haven't got time for that. Like, no, but seriously, I'm not playing any like intellectual games. I got accused of playing intellect. The only other person that's ever accused me of playing intellectual games was a fundamentalist Christian when I was telling them to read Kant. So, like,
offering justifications for communism, when he's saying positive things about the ideals of Lenin, even though he combines that.
Look, I actively many times criticized Lenin, and I even ended that like debate with a critique of Lenin. My fucking God, for the last time, I disagree with the philosophy of Vladimir Lenin and Trotsky, right? I'm not a Stalinist. I do not agree with Mao. I am not a tanky. Please stop comparing me to these ideological ingrates, right? I'm not one of them. And then all I said was that Lenin had abstract ideals that were idealistic, right? But then his cold pragmatism was ultimately disgusting and would not lead to those ideals, right? All I said is that when Lenin wrote his books, he talked about he talked about upper stage communism, and upper stage communism is essentially a life where individuals live almost in an anarchy, right? They don't. There's no necessarily government in which there is a state. There's no communist party which is telling people how to live their lives. There's no vanguard. Every individual is capable of running their lives and running the state. And he also says that every individual is basically, there is no such thing as in Trotsky. There's no such thing as scarcity, and that individuals are basically have this removal of need and live in this utopia, right? They're basically writing science fiction, right? They're basically writing like political fiction. And all I said was like, those goals aren't that disgusting, but then that cold pragmatism and how they try to bring these things around ultimately showed like why the ideology is condemnable. Like, but whatever, man, like just take anything I say out of context and then use it against us in this, like, why are you justifying Lenin? I am not justifying Lenin. For the last time, I am not a Leninist. Please, for the love of God, just get it, just understand that point.
That with critical statements about Lenin and critical statements about Mao, okay? The actual net effect of what he's saying, it just makes me think he is a crypto-communist. And many people who watch my interaction with him and watch the comments popping up, they said, whoa, this guy's whole audience seems to be comprised of crypto-communists.
Whoa, shots fired. Yous are all crypto-commies. Welcome to the revolution, guy. Class. How does it feel, guys? 34 of you viewing right now. How do you guys feel, you crypto-commie scum? Oh, you just disgust me.
That's how the internet works. Like attracts like.
What do you mean, like attracts? I don't even talk that much about politics. I only just started talking a bit more about politics. Whew, what the hell's going on, man?
The type of people who would enjoy hearing.
All right, you guys from now on are just crypto-commies to me. I just want you to know that. Like, you're all filthy crypto-commies.
Those kinds of mealy-mouthed, middle-of-the-road statements, rationalizing what Mao Zedong did and trying to rescue the pure...
Did anyone? I never gave one single justification of anything Mao said. Right, I'm going to point that out. Right, not even one good thing. Not even idealistically. I was just like, not once.
Definition of communism from the chalkboard. My fundamental point here is that thinking in the first person, thinking about yourself and your desires first and foremost, all right?
And how are you going to do that as a nihilist? That's what I would like to ask you. How are you going to analyze yourself and your... I will, yeah. How are you going to analyze yourself and your desires and, ultimately the bedrock of, like, how you're approaching reality without, like, language and meaning and some way to structure arguments and understand yourself and, like, analyze yourself? Like, how are you planning on doing that? As a nihilist, man, it's all meaningless, right?
Thinking
you're the fucking nihilist. That's just so you guys know, that's a Big Lebowski quote.
About the abstract meanings of words on a chalkboard, not even secondarily, but really it doesn't enter into our philosophizing and our political theorizing at all right? Thinking about yourself as a creative person, as a destructive person, as someone who's going to change history from your tiny pinpoint on the map and the tiny chronological span of your life. And nobody knows how long it is, right? Yes, in theory, you could get hit.
I'm talking about history. History doesn't exist, man. I thought we're nihilists.
Hit by a car tomorrow, very unlikely. But, it's not reasonable to rationalize how you're living your life here and now in terms of grandiose abstractions. Whether you think of these as Platonic abstractions or Marxist abstractions, frankly, that exist in all times for all people. Right? It doesn't make sense to rationalize what you're doing here and now with reference to some utopia that's supposedly going to exist on Earth.
when I talk about like trying to bring around like genuine change and like let's talk about like idealism for a second, right? Like this ideal goal. Now, I don't mean idealism metaphysically. I mean like in terms of motivation, in terms of how we live our lives, with the goals that we seek to achieve. This overall abstract telos, right? So long as it like what we do is we construct like these end goals which are somewhat distant and far away, but ultimately are pulling us towards them, right? We move towards these goals, right? And because we have these goals in mind, this final cause, as you know, Aristotle understood it, this purpose from which we are directing our lives towards. I thought, funnily enough, I thought the guy actually really liked Aristotle which is so funny because it's so different, Aristotle. When we're moving towards these abstract goals, like not abstract, but like, you know, these philosophically unrealized goals, these things that are not present here and now, we are moving towards something better, and our understanding of better then progresses as we get there, and we constantly progress and better ourselves as people, as a society, as an overarching, morally progressing agents, right? And that's kind of the purpose of these like, idealistic goals. So when I talk about like, I want our society to develop to the point in which animals are not being slaughtered, that I can, and maybe in the next so many years, I see, the increased costs of animal agriculture occurring. I see them, having to reel back supply, and at the same time, I see the increasing growth of plant-based alternatives and increasing number of vegans and so on. These are real-life goals in order to create an abstract end, which may be seen as like the vegan utopia. I want to see a vegan world because a vegan world is better for everyone, especially the animals, and that's what a vegan should have in mind. And it's funny to see like a vegan say like, well, we shouldn't talk about abstract goals, we shouldn't talk about ultimate ends. And it's like, well, man, if we weren't as vegans talking about these ends that are not realized within the state today, then what do you think that we are trying to do when we avoid animal products? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what is the goal of veganism if the goal of veganism isn't the emancipation of animals, which is not realized today? So it's so strange to see a vegan talk like this, and I ultimately don't think that it helps you direct your life if you don't have an overall telos from which you move towards. It may change as you grow older. It may change as you experience more in life and engage more philosophically with yourself, and maybe engage with other individuals and analyze yourself in society and so on. But ultimately, having a goal, having an end, is vital towards being an effective, intentional agent within reality.
More than 1,000 years into the future. Let's put a human face on it. I've considered applying for and getting Israeli citizenship. To live in Israel would be very difficult for me politically. I think in Israel, ironically, I would probably only hang out with far left-wing people. Those are the only people willing to talk to me. I'd probably hang out with left-wing vegans. You'd be living in a war zone, and it's a war where I really don't have a lot of sympathy for either side engaged in the war. You guys.
Well, I have sympathy for the people caught between it. And I think that he'd probably agree with that.
Have some sense of going, I'm an atheist. I'm a very active, vocal atheist. So it's very difficult for me to say anything good about any government that is openly theocratic. All right, I'm not real sympathetic for the government of Saudi.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Israeli government either, or Hamas for that matter.
Arabia, modern state of Israel, it's better than Saudi Arabia, but it's a much worse government than the government of Switzerland. Admittedly, the Swiss Constitution opens by invoking the name of God. Switzerland is not a perfectly atheist, unfortunately.
But the thing is, like, a perfectly atheist, like, who's a perfectly atheist? Who's applying abstract notions of reality to states now? I never said, like, unfortunately, Switzerland is not perfectly atheist because it needs to conform to your ideals of atheism. You know, that abstract word that you wrote on the chalkboard. I'm not doing that. You are.
Fortunately, I wish Switzerland were 100% atheist, but it's not. All right, with that digression aside. A well-deserved pause. Hold on.
Bloody
I've been obsessed with belts for a long time. I wear a belt.
I've been obsessed with belts for a long time. That's not bourbon, is it? That's juice, right? I think it's juice.
would it make sense for me to live my life in Israel now with reference to some future utopia?
Has he mentioned his daughter in this, or is this mostly being aimed at me? Like anyone else heard him mention his daughter yet?
In which all the Jews have ceased believing in Judaism, all the Muslims have ceased to believe in Islam, and everyone embraces each other. And
Imagine all the everyone living for the day.
brotherhood. Even if you believe that's the inevitable future, if you believe that's coming 500 years from now, 300 years would be too close, right? Is it 500 years? Is it 1,000 years? Even if you believe in that, not as something probable, but as something definite and certain and inevitable, right? It would be a gross, bizarre aberration in your life to live your own life, to make your decisions here and now with reference to that future utopia, with that future outcome, which is, of course, incredibly improbable. You've got to make your decisions here and now based on who you are, reality in the world around you, and what you can accomplish in the next 5 years.
Yeah, like, but that's the whole point. Let's say you have this overarching goal, like, oh, I really think that, you know, as he's talking about, like, Israel being, like, theocratic. Maybe I want Israel to be less religious, and I want them to be engaged more, you know, critically about the way they're approaching other religions and the way they're approaching, you know, the people of Palestine and so on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to engage with the Israeli people in a way that will ultimately challenge their beliefs. Maybe I mightn't get them to go atheist or anything like that, which is his overarching goal, but maybe I can get them to at least become less fundamental, more questioning, more critical of their government and their, like, you know, theological principles and so on, right? Like, maybe that's his goal, right? That's actually achievable because of the overarching goal where you go, you know what, it would be better if the world was like this. And so today, I'm going to do this in order to move towards that goal, right? That's the whole point of having, like, you know, a goal and an end, a telos. Why does it, every time I try and press that?
Right? What sense does it make for someone to live their life and make their decisions here and now with reference to a future communist utopia, a future socialist utopia, or in this kid's case, a future anarchist utopia, and to treat that as a certainty, not as a fantasy, but as something they believe in?
Well, like, not a certainty. I never said we're certain to end up in an anarchist utopia. I just hope that our ethics progress to the point in which individuals live in a state of mutual cooperation and consider each other as, you know, the ends of our experience, and that the market then reflects that overall social development in real economic terms. That's kind of like my hope. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Like, ideological dogmatism is, you know, rife, and, you know, obviously there's capitalist power structures that would need massively dismantled, and obviously the individual within the average everyday individual within society would need to engage within politics in a very different way. But I'm part of the overall community existing now, and anything that goes on now can be influenced by me in terms of my discourse and the way I approach other individuals. And so I might be able to have, like, a massive impact upon the world, but I might be able to have impact upon even one person's life. For example, I had a conversation the other day with a guy called Jacob Garcia, and he messaged me today saying, because of that conversation, like, because after having that conversation, he had a reflection of what I said, and he's decided to go vegan. Now, I was overjoyed, obviously, to hear this, and that's because, like, I'm trying to engage with him on veganism. Not because, like, necessarily, I might have rather, like, if I was to be, like, hedonistic, for example, just wanted to go and play games and not have the conversation. But because I engaged in that conversation, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love philosophy, and talking to the guy was actually really pleasurable. It was just a really nice conversation. The overall end of that conversation, though, was to convey the ideology and convey the overall arguments for veganism, right? And because of that, he's went vegan. He's engaged with veganism in a way that he saw, like, you know what, this is a good way to approach reality. And he went vegan. And that is important because of the overall goal, which is the emancipation of animals. Like, what Jacob consumes, like, no offense to you, Jacob, what you consume as food on a day-to-day basis is of very little concern to me. I'm pretty sure you don't care what I'm going to have for dinner either. So what really matters is how you're approaching life in terms of like an ethical relationship with the other, how you're going to talk, how you're going to go on to talk to other individuals, and how you're going to spend your money and monetarily vote towards systems of oppression. And that's the overall goal of me as a vegan, is to dismantle these systems of oppression by talking to people and changing their consumptive habits. Now, I don't understand how a vegan can not understand the value of having an overarching goal of your life, or an overarching goal of your actions, which brings meaning to a series of actions. I think he needs to get off like the nihilism train.
As inevitable, as certain, and then to make your decisions about the real world and what you can accomplish here and now, with reference to live your whole life in the shadow of this unreal ideal.
How can a vegan say that though? Like, could you imagine? Like, how could a vegan say that? Like, are you truly a vegan? Like, come on.
You guys have heard me say before, atheism is not enough. It's not enough.
But even atheism itself is a linguistic concept about whether we should or should not believe in a God. Like, when you say you're an atheist, you're like, I do not believe in a God. Like, and it's like, well, do you care about people believing in God? And he clearly does. He's like, well, it would be better if everyone didn't believe in God. And it's like, overall, you're trying to conform reality to an ideological concept, which you said yourself is the wrong approach to reality. So not only are you acting in a way which you actively dismiss, which I'm not surprised as a nihilist you're doing, because there's no real, nothing but absurdity in nihilism, but ultimately, you're already engaged in a way of ethical thinking that, presupposes the value of an end.
To just reject the belief in a particular God or a particular religious system. You have to challenge the religiosity of our ways of thinking about everything, right?
Is
you
religiosity
have to challenge these fixed ideals that haunt us, that shape our lives when we're dreaming as well as when we're awake, all right? What you have to do is learn to live with the dynamism of doubt, all right? Do you think that one day in the future, all Muslims will just stop believing in Islam and will embrace Jewish people as their equals, will happily let their sons and daughters intermarry with Jewish people, will see no invidious distinction between Muslims and Jews? Do you see that? Do you see that as the inevitable future? Do you think that's definite?
I don't say it's inevitable, but it's something that I would hope would happen. And I hope that as ethics progresses in these states, that people become less xenophobic and more willing to allow the engagement with other cultures and races and so on. That's kind of what I would hope for, and because I hope for that, it's what I would preach.
Definite? You think that's certain? Wouldn't it be different to live your life acknowledging that that's a beautiful fantasy, but that there's every reason to doubt that?
Well, it's okay, yeah, there is every reason to doubt it, but by using the whole point of doubt is to be a useful tool in our our understanding. It's okay, well, what is getting in the way of that beautiful fantasy, as you say? If it's beautiful, then we should want to establish it in reality. So what is getting away? What is taking us away from that, from the beauty of that realization that finally we have reached that goal? And through use of doubt, you can go, and through use of critical thinking as a whole, you can go, well, wait a minute, this dogmatic approach towards, for example, this theological belief is perhaps inhibiting that. So if I engage people with, on this topic in relation to that belief, I can hopefully help change some hearts and minds, which will ultimately open up to a much wider discourse. Which is why people like me and you make YouTube videos and talk to as many people as we can in order to have an influence upon the broader overall conversations that are happening in reality.
Wouldn't it be better to live with constant gnawing doubt about just how bad the conflict is, and that it could get worse, and that it could get worse and worse and worse, and that the future could actually be worse than the past? that
Well, it could be, but the whole point of talking about possibilities is talking about what is most likely rather than like what is inevitable. It's like I think you're approaching like knowledge from a non-fallibilist perspective where you have to, you know, approach it from like what is definitely going to happen. And it's like, well, no, it's like I could see that there are like a few likely possibilities based upon the current circumstances and, you know, overall ideologies. And I may say like, okay, well, based on these probable outcomes, I'm going to prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and engage in, you know, trying to encourage people to move towards that better future. Like, I don't see the issue there.
the future for the Jewish people could be worse than what happened in World War II? Isn't that something to fear? Isn't that something to doubt? Right? All this horseshit that comes out of Marxism, all these certainties.
Well, I don't understand because, like for example, like take World War II when the socialists, you know, were all hunted down and killed by the Nazis. The socialists would have been against what was happening to the Jews for the most part. Don't get me wrong, there were anti-Semitic socialists, and it was true. Like anti-Semitism wasn't, you know, like only a right-wing concept at the time. But socialism does profess usually when socialists try and promote the overall goals of equality and consideration of others. Obviously, some forms of communism and like totalitarianism obviously like destroy that notion, but usually it's not based on race. Socialists have rejected a lot of ideological like prejudices throughout history. Like, you know, for example, like sexism, like women were able to work alongside men and do the same jobs as men in communist countries. So it's like, don't get me wrong, like, yeah, like things could get worse. You know, anti-Semitism could grow and the world could be, you know, turn against the you know, the Jewish religion, and like people might want to like harm them and so on like that. It's possible, but by understanding that is a possibility, then we can prepare ourselves to, you know, prevent that possibility from occurring, or maybe not give in to the fear of that possibility and then actualizing it by accident by trying to create like anti-Semitic propaganda. And so what we end up doing is actually promoting and antagonizing an enemy which has been dormant for like 60 years. You know, it would be it's just nonsense, really. His position.
All these fables about the future, right? The problem is the impact they have on the present, here and now, right? There's this old catchphrase in the academic study of history. I'm sorry, I forget who said it first. It's probably John Dewey or someone really boring like that. You know, we study history not to take something away from the past, but for what it adds to the present.
Well, yeah, but then that is talking about abstract analytic thinking applied to reality, right? And he's saying that was a problem just before he made that comment. So wait a minute, like, tell us if you see like an issue here, guys.
Boring like that, you know, right? The problem is the impact they have on the present, here and now, right? There's this old catchphrase.
So the problem is how ideology impacts the present here and now.
Phrase in the academic study of history. I'm sorry, I forget who said it first.
So
probably John Dewey.
So like we shouldn't analyze, we shouldn't be trying to apply, you know, abstract philosophical concepts to the here and now.
We or someone really boring like that. You know, we study history not to take something away from the past, but for what it adds to the present, right? The problem.
So yeah. Like, so we should learn history so that we don't, you know, commit the errors of the past over and over again, right? Which is, again, like abstract philosophical thinking applied to reality. Like, just like you did with atheism, it's just what you did with history. How are you a nihilist? This doesn't make any sense.
The problem is that people live with these fantasies about the future, with these convictions about what's inevitable and certain about the future. And it really takes something away from the present.
I agree, which is why we use philosophy to analyze like dogmatism, analyze these prejudices and biases that are innate within our subjectivity, and why we need to engage within this analysis so that we're not living dogmatic lives. In the words of Immanuel Kant, Sappa Ode, have the courage to use your own understanding. Philosophy is a practical subject. It's not something that we're it's not something passive. It's something that we apply to our lives, and ultimately why we should be applying this thinking to our lives. When we talk about people like in terms of socialism, what we are talking about when we talk about socialism, what we are actually talking about is the application of a concept that would overall increase equality. And if it did not increase equality, then we should not apply it. And we should constantly be analyzing the concept as we apply it. And that's kind of the whole point. It's hermeneutics. And that's what I would recommend Eisel reads into, is philosophical hermeneutics. Someone like Hans-Georg Gadamer, Truth and Method.
All right. The leitmotif of that discussion was my saying to this kid, look, the process we're engaged in here is not about setting up a perfect definition of socialism on the chalkboard, a perfect geometric theorem. It's not about defining these concepts precisely so that you can believe in them. All right? The point is to critique and debunk and discard all ideologies, all ideals, so that you can start believing in yourself.
Well, wait a minute. Okay, so we'll critique, we'll debunk all ideologies. And then what the hell are we left with? Right? How do we approach life? The whole point and the problem of nihilism in the first place is it leaves us empty and without anything, no grounding, nothing. We end up in what's called absurdism, right? Where any action is as justified as any other, and so we have no direction. We may have force and strength of will in Nietzschean terms. We may have the will to power, but we have no direction. If you like to think of it, I like to think of it as like a vector. In terms of Nietzschean philosophy and the expression of will, for example, it has magnitude, it has strength, but it does not have direction, like a vector. And because of that, it does not expel its strength against the world. The will is left unable to express its subjectivity. And this is the real threat of nihilism. Obviously, Nietzsche's not a nihilist. Please do not be the millionth person in the world to tell me that Nietzsche's not a nihilist, because I know. But at the same time, he shares this fundamental critique of normative thinking, right? And so what we have left, if we enter this like kind of absurdist nihilistic framework, is absolutely nothing. We have no direction in life. We have no purpose in life. We have nothing to move towards. We can believe in ourselves, but what are we talking about? We're believing in nothing. Like the whole fundamental, the whole point of, if you read someone like Sartre, for example, we are nothing, right? There is nothing which is prior to this. Everything else is placed upon us ideologically. It is the construction artificially through language. And so when we create a causal link, and which gives a series of actions meaning, we are actually directing our lives into a direction towards an overall goal. And without that series, meaning, without that meaning which gives actions, which gives a series of actions, purpose and direction, then we are going to be left empty and alone. We're not going to be able to actually act within the world. We might as well just lie down and die in the typical thinking, because ultimately it's just as valuable to lie down and die as it is to not lie down and die. We are left in a state of complete indecision, and this is essentially the issue of nihilism, and it's something that I think that he really needs to kind of get over.
The most fundamental insight of my teenage years was the realization that all authority is mere authorship. Karl Marx was at one time a struggling author, just trying to write a hit book. Okay, some of you in the audience will know what that's like. I'm right now trying to write a book. I hope as many as 1,000 people read it. 500 people I'd be happy with. I'm trying to write a hit book on a tiny scale. I'm trying to write a book that's appealing to and meaningful for a tiny.
I think he's writing a book on politics. I'll review it if, like this video, if you guys want me to review Eisel Mazard's book on politics. Again, like if we get like I don't know, it's like 100 likes, I'll review it. My God, like that's
niche market. And I pointed this out in an earlier video. He had very specific examples of authors who'd been successful in the decades leading up to this, and he modeled what he was trying to do as a creative writer, as an author. And he came up with these stories, with these fables, and millions of people died because these stories...
What the hell, man? Like, Karl Marx, like, spent years in study, right? He wasn't just like, oh, I came up with these stories and fables. He was writing fiction. It's like, Karl Marx, like, if you look at, like, how much work Karl Marx put in, it, like, makes me just feel sickeningly bad. Like, the amount of, like how much he wrote, how much he researched, the amount of philosophy that, like, Karl Marx actually engaged in was, like, insane. Like, don't get me wrong, there are things I disagree with Marx on, and it doesn't make him right just because he did a lot of work. But, like, one of the, like, things was, like, you would go to the library, I think it was like in Oxford or something, and he'd just work for, like 10 hours at a time or something. It was, like, just something ridiculous. Like, the guy was, like, a workaholic. He was not just some guy that's just writing fables and stuff like that. And even if, right, Karl Marx's intentions, right, for the book had nothing to do with his overall goals within communism, which I find highly, highly doubtful, they would still be arguments in their own right, and philosophically we should analyze them as such. You know, divorce the author.
Set the human imagination on fire, okay? But they're just stories. He's just...
The thing is that I'm not gonna lie, like, he doesn't really write stories either, man. Like, he's not really writing, like massively, like, grand narratives. Like, he's not, like, I don't read Karl Marx and get, like, parables and fables from that. And, like, if you pick up, like, Das Kapital, you're gonna get, like, right, so we're gonna talk right now. Like, seize the means of subscription, guys. We're gonna talk right now about you know, abstract labor, like what is the value in a trade that is being respected by a trade? How should we respect the value of, like, the transactions in trade? What is the grounding within market value? What is abstract labor? What does it represent? And is everyone's labor the same? Like, he's not talking about, like, various different stories, like, oh, so there was this guy that went into a factory and then, like, there was this nasty boss and then all of a sudden revolution. Like, no, right? Like, okay, the guy's presenting arguments throughout the whole book, man.
An author, he's just a storyteller, and so are you. So are you and you and you. Okay.
Like, don't get me wrong, I agree that we're all approaching life from a narrativistic position, who are, you know, we all have our own understandings of reality, and we're all co-authors of this reality in which we experience. Like, I have no doubt about that. But that would actually imply that there is a story, and you're supposed to be a nihilist. There's no story. There's no supposed to be any overarching meaning which is given, like, you know, any kind of grounding to our lives. What you're supposed to be saying is that none of us are writers, that we are we are the monkeys in that thought experiment who accidentally write Shakespeare. That's all we are to Eisel, and that's all we should be within nihilism. But, like, no, like, instead, like, we are, you know, instead these co-authors, because he preaches nihilism in like words, like, he gives lip service to nihilism, but everything he says is non-nihilistic.
There's a very real sense in which the whole world's history begins and ends with your life, your potential to make a difference in the world, what you can accomplish in the next 5 years. That has to be your concern, not any geometric theorem, not any definition of any set of concepts written up on a chalkboard.
So yeah, guys, that was Eisel Mazard's Nihilism, Advice for My Daughter, and Perspective Philosophy. So yeah, I'd like to thank Eisel for making the response. You know, I'll give you a like. I'll have to sign in. I'll sort that out later. I'll give him a like. And, you know, like, go comment, let him know that I, you know, turned up, for example, and I've reviewed his video, and that I at least appreciate that, you know, I'm taking the time out of his day to make the response. I disagree with almost everything he said. Sorry, Eisel, that's just, like, I guess that's the nature of things. But I do appreciate the sentiment, and I do appreciate the engagement philosophically with these topics. And yeah, as I say, if I get 100 likes on this video, you know, I'll review his book. Let us know if you want that. And so now we're gonna what was it, 99% PP, 1% his daughter. Well, yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know why he like kind of put me next to his daughter. I don't know if like he's like, I don't know if he's like Eisel wants to be my daddy. You know what I mean? Like, he talked a lot about home. No, but seriously, I have no idea. I don't know if it was like a thing to like, you know, basically like father is like a father figure, you know, kind of leading us into the right direction or whatever. But we're all just filthy crypto commies here. I'm his like prodigal son, and he needs to like teach us the real the way to live life, and it's not to be this crypto commie scum anymore. But yeah. So yeah, guys, we're just gonna open it up to a Q&A now. So if you've got a question that you like answer, drop it into the chat. Remember, actually, if you get engaged in the chat and you're watching this, you can generate points, which ultimately can get you Discord roles now, which you can purchase through your loyalty points if you get like 5,000 points. If you want your question, if you want your question bumped up to the top of the list, then you can donate through the Streamlabs donation link in chat. That's been, pumped up by the. Oh God. Okay, actually, yeah, go on. Going going through the, Streamlabs bot. You can get your question bumped up to the top of the list. I'm going to pin that just in case anyone, because I know the bot like kind of goes to and fro. Yeah, Republic credits, guys. I need to work out. When first person buys it, you are basically whoever buys the like bronze, silver, or tier reward system first. You are basically the guinea pig for this system because I've never used this before. But I'll make sure you get your Discord role and that you can enter the Republic as a citizen of the glorious Republic. I will be your philosopher king for this evening. So yeah, I will say with his overall approach as well, I'll give him one thing that I will say: we do have to beware of abstract ideological thinking and applying that to reality. He is right there, and that's why we should engage with the hermeneutics. Application analysis, constantly. We should definitely analyze our positions, but we do need to extrapolate and understand reality from a broader overall perspective than like an individualistic in the moment perspective, which can ultimately lead us down a path of like dogmatism and bias, which can blind us to the overall significance of our actions, which is why you end up with people that are so stupid that they become like neo-Nazis and they've been raised by racists and they fall into that way of thinking without having to analyze their lives, and so they become these like dogmatic ideological slaves. So yeah, like these things happen because of a lack of like philosophical analysis. But yeah, again, like anyone who wants to ask a question, just drop it in the chat. So I think there was a question there from so the Real Truth video says, have you read Max Stirner? I actually haven't read Max Stirner. A nihilist, isn't he? I think Max Stirner, I'm pretty sure he's a nihilist. Max Stirner. I keep meaning, I think one of quite a few of my viewers have told us to post-Hegelian philosopher. And then one of the forerunners of nihilism. Cool, yeah. I haven't read Max Stirner, but I keep meaning to. Like, I've been told to read him like a million times, which is, yeah. I think his psychological egoism works as a meta-ethical basis. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I will say psychological egoism, as I've engaged with it before, I would argue is just misunderstands the concept of ego, to be entirely honest with you, usually presupposes an individualistic, embedded, holistic agent, kind of the same thing that psychology typically does, rather than understanding the individual to be a production of language in many ways. So yeah, phenomenologically, I usually see egoism as incapable of bringing around truth. And thank you very much, Wicked Fatigue, who says, commenters on previous video implied you didn't know Amazon workers get equity. Could you comment on other ways employers undermine employee ownership, siphoning off pensions, hiring workers for too few hours to get benefits, firing people for unionizing? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And thank you for your donation, Wicked Fatigue. I really appreciate it. Yeah, actually, one of the funny things is that getting given even a low-hour contract. So first you've got like 0-hour contracts. That's a big way people are exploited in the West today. So I went and applied for a 0-hour contract once when I was like 18, 19, and ended up just walking out the interview. I was like, oh my God. And I realized what I was applying for. It was so exploitative. They were going to, right. So you basically, this is the job that I was applying for. You wake up at 6 a.m. You get public transport to Newcastle, right? Then when you get to Newcastle, so you are there at like 6 a.m. Once you get there, you then have to board a bus, and you could get shipped down to like somewhere as far as Manchester, right? So pretty far down the country, quite a few hours drive, right? And during that time, you are not paid at all. Not paid at all, right? And then when you get there, you then pull a full shift in which you aren't paid for your first break, but then you are paid for any subsequent break after that. Then you put back on a bus, and then you aren't paid again for the return trip. So you could be doing like 16 hours, for example, 4 hours there, 4 hours back, and an 8-hour shift, and you'll get paid for less than 8 hours work, because you'll get your first break of like, I think it was 20 minutes isn't paid. So you get paid like 7.5 hours for basically having to pull 16 hours. That's the kind of exploitation that workers face today. It's not just in terms of like wages. It's in terms of contracts. It's in terms of what we even consider the work to be, right? In terms of like, for example, siphoning off pensions, right? You've got pensions funds being, I mean, a lot of the time it can be illegal and like dodgy, like you get like cronyism, but you do get pension funds that, collapse with businesses. People's like overall well-being is destroyed, like, because like, for example, like BHS, I'm pretty sure their pension fund, I can't remember, I'll have to double check, I'm pretty sure their pension funds were ultimately like destroyed by the collapse of the company and weren't protected. And yet the CEO, the owner, I think, actually went and bought a yacht straight after it, which was worth something like 16 million. These are the kind of like exploitative adventures that happens in capitalism today. Or what about like, hiring workers to and expecting too much work from them. So if you go to somewhere like Lidl, Aldi, their business model works on being understaffed. It's deliberately understaffed in order to get as much work from them as possible, and they justify that by paying them slightly above minimum wage, right? So they put them through incredible amounts of stress in order to but pay them slightly extra, and they justify that business model as, oh, well, they get paid more. But in reality, they aren't actually being paid what they should be getting paid in the first place, which is the value of the product of their labor, and instead paid a wage which distances them from it. And so the increased profits that Lidl faces or Aldi faces in relative to their competition, like Asda, Sainsbury's, and so on, don't actually get funneled down to the workers. And so what we are saying today is an exploitation of the working class, not just in terms of not owning the means of production, but in terms of even their relationship in terms of employment. As an employee, they have no say in how their contract is formulated. And this is why Karl Marx talks about the alienation of the worker and how the worker is alienated from such a variety of decisions within their life. Even in terms of like basic creativity, we are stifled in terms of how we can even engage within our job. We are normally given for example, a procedural process which hinders even like a better idea. You can't have ideas in capitalism. The only people that can have ideas are your bosses. And if you do have an idea and you give it to that boss, then you're not going to get anything from it. There was a guy I worked at, remember hearing a story of a guy. I worked at Santander for a while as a contractor, and it was a terrible job. I'm very glad to be out of there. And the one guy, right, like this one of my friends was telling us, he worked there for a long time. He worked there for like absolute trooper. I worked there for like years. Although from what he was saying, there was something a little bit dodgy about how he stayed there for the first so many months of sort of a year or whatever. But then he became like proficient at the job, and he kept the job, whatever. Anyway, so. Yeah, anyway, he was saying there was this guy that and not to give you my whole life story or anything, but there was this guy that was he basically found like a way to do the job better, saved the company about company about £1 million, right? A million, right? Santander about £1 million, and I think he got a shitty certificate as a thank you. That's capitalism today. You know, like these are the world. This is the world we live in, where you could save a company £1 million, and what you will receive is a certificate and a pat on the back. You won't get a promotion even. You won't even get like a, oh, like here's some time off, paid leave and shit like that. No, you get like, oh, cheers, get back to work. That's the reward that you'll be faced within capitalism. And so yeah, like absolutely, like when we talk about like the way employers undermine employee ownership, it's unbelievable. And the way that we and even employee autonomy is unbelievable. And you know, we're not even talking about firing for unionization, especially in places where unionization is, you know, heavily frowned upon. It's unbelievable. And a lot of the time it can even come with like under the board threat. So even if it's like, right, well, we're not going to openly fire you for joining a union, but if you do join a union, you're going to lose your job. A big example of that was like slaughterhouse workers, I think, were trying to unionize in slaughterhouse workers were trying to unionize in the United States, and they were basically told like, right, if you join a union, right, we're just going to replace everyone in this factory anyway. We'll just sack you all, right? Like, go and unionize. Like, and this is kind of the issues that we're faced today. But thank you very much for your donation, Wicked Fatigue. I hope I explained the points well enough. Hi. There's a good boy. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, just drop them into the chat or donate via the donation link, and you'll have your question bumped to the top. What did you think of that video by Eisel, by the way? Like, I still don't know what like even think of it, like really, like at all. I don't know where to like kind of go from that. Like, yeah, people have an IT. Yeah, I have an IT degree, and people can automate their entire job only to be immediately fired because they're not needed. Yeah, exactly. I think like there was like the only issues is whether like sometimes the software like is more expensive than a lot of the time than the people's time, which is like, all right, so basically we're going to make people compete now. It's like, I think it was like that's you know, like that age-old story of that guy who competed against the steam locomotive only to have his like heart explode in his chest. That's the plight of the working class today. Do you guys want to see some maybe it's a bit of Fall Guys now? Yeah, let's have a let's play. Just want to see how bad I am at Fall Guys. Have you read Judith Jarvis's book on normativity? No, I haven't. So I'll Google it. Judith Jarvis. I haven't actually heard of Judith Jarvis before. Judith Jarvis Thompson, American philosopher. Analytic philosophy. The realm of rights, goodness and advice, rights and normativity. Normative thought. She brings out the normative thought is restricted to moral, is not restricted to not moral thought. Normative judgment is divided into two subkinds, the evaluative and the directive, but the subkinds are larger than this, commonly appreciated. Okay, I'll have to have a look at that and see what it's like. Oh, it looks like there's a lecture online of it. I'll go and check her out. Yeah, thanks for the heads up, man. I have a giant beer waiting for me after this stream. I don't normally drink, but then I found this like ages ago, and I've been keeping it for Christmas. I found this giant Danish beer with like Vikings on it, and I was like, that one, that beer. It's like a liter in a can with just like Vikings holding like hammers and like stuff in it. Oh, it's so cool, man! Absolutely cool. Right. Okay. It is cool how it just sort of auto detects a game. I really like that. And we'll put some music on. See if we can get like maybe do you just fancy the piano, or do you just want some like chill hop? Whichever we'll go for. Dusty Decks Golden Crates. Oh dear. What's this, like a blend of lo-fi and is that? Soulful lo-fi. I like the idea. I like the concept. We're gonna go for this. That's nice, man. I like that. Yeah, I think Max Turner, from what you're saying, maybe is more of an emotivist in that sense. I think it's the same with Nietzsche, right? It's like he's not a nihilist. Like he's just not, like the way he approaches reality. He's just not a nihilist. Ooh, wait a minute, guys. That very well might be a knock at my door. So I'll be 2 seconds, guys. I am back, everyone. Sorry about the delay. At least you had some like soulful beats. I just realized that like I'm not like my camera wasn't even like there. I was like smiling, like waving at the camera. Right. How many people have purchased the course? Like a few now. Yeah, like actually made some sales, and then I've gave it away to the people who donated to, you know, generously to, like, even before, like, obviously I was like really trying to make any money. Like I asked for help to, like, well, I just said, like, you know, if you just want to see any more content, I'm gonna need a mic, and then they just gifted money towards this mic, and because it was so generous, I was just like, well, these people need the course. You know what I mean? Like, it's only fair. So I just give everyone, no matter how much they donated, access to that. So I've got a few students like waiting. Yeah. What kind of philosophy is this? It's whatever philosophy you want it to be, baby. I've got to mention, don't you think you can comment on Alis's video to notify? Not sure whether he disables the comment. All right, well, I don't know, man. If he wants to find it, I'm sure he will. Stunner is a nihilist in the sense that we are the creative nothing and inherently egoists, but he wants to be a true egoist and not letting religious dogmas and shoulds define you. Well, I don't think that's nihilistic anyway. I think it's egoistic. Basically with the rejection of like external ideologies, more like Nietzsche. And like Nietzsche is like primitivistic, isn't he? He's like trying to relate it to like naturalism and an understanding of human nature. I think people were even accusing some like of Nietzsche of like plagiarizing Stirner, wasn't that right? Oh yeah, can you explain the bronze, silver, and gold thing in Discord? Absolutely. So I've set up basically VC and text channels that are only for people who are like Republic citizens. So if you're like a regular viewer, then you can go to like that part of the Discord and you'll meet people who are also like regular viewers of the channel, and basically engage in whatever conversations you want to engage in. It's just like your own private area to like have on Discord. And I thought it'd be pretty cool to like reward people with that kind of like, you know, space on me Discord who are, you know, just here. Like, it's not something that you necessarily have to pay for. You can grind your way up. Obviously you do get points for a donation, but like you get points just for viewing, and you get points for subscribing. So like these loyalty points are ultimately just like generated like through viewership, and like you've rewarded for your viewership by being able to enter the chat. And like obviously the highest goal, like gold, it costs the most, but then you get access to all the other 3 tiers. And yeah, like it's just like a cool place for you to like hang out. I suppose it's like just a way of like rewarding like loyalty, you know, to your crypto-commie leader. I'm at a half time to change my name to crypto-commie now. Everything's crypto-commie. Can I make it through this round? Nothing matters if I don't. Max Stirner. Oh no. 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 No, why am I so bad at this game? Get off me, pink man. No. No. Crypto-communist sounds better than perspective. I actually like the name crypto-commie. That's such a cool name. What the hell is a crypto-commie anyway? Like, crypto-communism. Is secret support or admiration for communism. Okay. Just double checking that. Fucking crypto-commie. Can't believe, how the fuck am I a crypto-commie, man? You're all crypto commies now. You're all part of this community. I never even heard of that before, you know. Like, honestly, it's a book by Mark Azad. Have you really? Have you? I've never even heard someone be called a crypto commie before. Do you think bodily autonomy persists through death in the case of animals? If not, then is it morally neutral to have sex with dead animals? Well, it's not like one of the things I would talk about is like virtue ethics, whether it's good for you and good for like society if you're perpetuating those desires, right? But ultimately, like, no one is being harmed. It's not like the action itself is in a vacuum without anything else considered is not like necessarily unethical. Like, as I said, like, you can have like death rituals, let's say like people who ate people, and if all else considered without disease and so on like that, then we would say that that's like morally neutral. But ultimately, it's not in a vacuum, and it's not morally neutral. So there was this guy, I think it was like on 1,001 Ways to Die. If any of you remember that TV show, where he like had sex with like a cow heart, and then it electrocuted him and killed him. And one of the things they were doing was like there was like psychologists and stuff on there, like basically saying they were like, yeah, we're kind of glad he's dead because we really think that this guy could have just turned into like something twisted and malevolent. And it's like, you know, I kind of agree. Like the chances of like someone like that turning into something like fucked up is, or like, you know, like something messed up is far more likely than someone who doesn't commit such actions and doesn't perpetuate such, perverse desires. Let's go. I've been fooled. No, no, no. Get out of my way. Everyone's altruistic until you're on Fall Guys. No. All hail the great. I am the communist leader. Chairman Lewis. Welcome to the party, guys. But yeah, like, I think when we talk about like ethics, it's not like bodily autonomy. Even like we talk about like death rituals and respect, are a big issue with that sort of thing as well. Like, you know, who owns your body after you die and so on like that, and how you should treat bodies after, like, you know, the individual's dead. I think these are like very important things to ask. Yeah, and again, if anyone has a question or anything they want to ask, just throw it in the chat, and I'll see how I can do it, if I can answer your question. The smooth, soulful beats have ended. What is going on? Get those dusty decks going again. Merry Christmas, everyone. Is there anyone's videos that you guys would like us to like review or anything? Like any like sort of like political videos, any like non-vegan videos or anything like that that you'd like reviewed? Any sort of philosophy that you would like me to comment upon, like watch and engage with? The same would apply then to necrophilia if the deceased had no family. I mean, obviously it comes with like societal expectations and virtue ethics as well. As I say, like when we talk about like what's even good for the individual, I would say necrophilia is bad for even the individual committing the act. Even if it, like, you know, I would argue that it's not necessarily harming the individual who's dead. It's certainly harming the individual who commits the action. And then it's also not only is it propagating like harmful desire in them, it also means that we all live in a society that we are very well aware that this might happen to us when we die. Maybe feel uncomfortable about that, or it may upset our families and so on. these things are to be considered. Ooh, that was close. No, oh dear Lord. How do I? There we go. Right. Oh my God, why am I so bad at this game? I think somebody asked before I clicked off. Why am I doing it this way? Somebody asked before, essentially, what's wrong with nihilism? So nihilism usually presupposes a theory of normativity, which then like justifies it, right? So like, if you don't believe in anything that grounds like norms and conventions, then ultimately you are reliant upon. Then you have no basis for the arguments, which would ultimately defeat the normativity from which you're reliant. So it, like, nihilism basically says like normativity, all of it, like meaning is impossible, right? There is no knowledge, there is no grounding for meaning and understanding of reality, right? But if that's the case, then all of the arguments for for nihilism are not true. And moral nihilism, unless it's like special pleading, is incapable of presenting a normative difference between other norms and conventions and seen in like history, science, you know, and other epistemic fields, and that in ethics. And unless it can do that, which I've not seen a very good argument for at all, then it basically fails to the companions in guilt argument. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Ivan. Question mark. I want to build up my philosophy channel. Any advice? Be here more than I am. That would be my first. That would be my first. Like, you know, piece of advice. Just be there. You know, find questions that people want answered, but also engage in what you're passionate about. And then that's basically what I'd say. Like, yeah, engage with other people online who are doing philosophy. Hell, I'll have you on the channel. Question mark. I don't know why I called you question when your name's Mark. I'll have you on the channel. Question. But is there anyone would like to see us debate, for example? Don't say Vosh, because I swear to God that man will never debate us, so... I really want to debate like Destiny and on socialism. Who's your favourite philosopher in terms of who you look to the most? Probably Alistair McIntyre. I would say that he's like, just his work's very, very impressive. Yeah. And he's been engaged in philosophy for a long time, and he's been like being consistently engaged in philosophy through his whole life. People like I think it's like people like Gadamer and stuff, like, as well, like, you know, taught themselves like, you know, Latin and ancient Greek in order to engage in philosophy to the greatest overall degree. Like, yeah, that's really impressive as well. Dear Lord. No, not that way. Did it. Get out of my way. No. Oh, that was terrible. I can't even get on the platform. I'd like to see you debate that vegan lawyer and Gary Franconi. I hope I said his name right. Gary Franconi. Who's Gary Franconi? Let's have a look, man. That vegan lawyer first, right? She's like a conservative, I think people are saying. Yeah, I'll debate her. what do you want us to debate her on? And Gary Franconi, yeah. Am I in the game yet? No, okay. Gary Franconi. Why is nobody saying Ben Shapiro, right? Wait 1 second. I've got to win. Welcome to capitalism, everyone. Come on. See that? I just used like others' labor to my own advantage. They move the platform. I take advantage of the shift. Like a true capitalist. Oh. Let's go. Nope. Huh. Oh no! I've been betrayed. Yes. Yes. No. Haha. Haha. Success. Right. Xander Hall. I've never talked to Xander Hall before. Who's Xander Hall? So we've got... Is Gary Franconi a American legal scholar? Or is it someone different? Animal rights abolitionist approach. You take like a legal approach to like vegan activism, because that's pretty cool. Like I do like even with the vegan lawyer, I'm assuming they do that as well. That's a really good way to like commit vegan activism, and I think understanding like the relationship between the individual and legislation is really important, and I think it was really like well emphasized in like movements like the civil rights movements like led by Martin Luther King and so on. Xander Hall. I've never spoke to Xander Hall, but he's a leftist apparently, so... Oh dear lord, what am I even doing? What's even going on? What do I even have to jump through the hoops? Oh shit. Oh damn it! This really is capitalism. I'm jumping through hoops. I'm pushing people out the way. Oh my god, I'm getting harmed by my comrades. No! Well, we're just getting back on that because we are definitely ain't gonna be eliminated unless we do something like... Oh, this is looking bleak, guys. This is looking bleak. No! Let me off this train. Oh, we are so fucked. Damn. Yeah, I don't know what Rem's up to these days, either. I hope he's alright. Like, I don't think he's doing very much Twitch or anything. I think he's still vegan. I hope he's still vegan. It's pretty cool. Like, he said that he went vegan after, like, shortly after talking to us. He must have, like, went and done some, like, research and stuff, and, like, it was like, pretty cool, man. Nick Bostrom. Is that like Nick from Discord? I think I might have. Like, I think I've spoken to him before. If it's Nick from Discord, like, he's a cool guy, neuroscientist. How do you know you exist and that this is not a simulation? The way I would respond to that is the way that Strawson responds to these, like, you know, for example, like to the claims of like solipsism. It's not that I look for certainty that I do exist and that I'm not in a simulation. I judge the argument of whether I'm in a simulation against the argument that I'm not. And I would say that there is more evidence to argue that I am not than that there is arguments to say that I am, in which case I believe that I'm not in a simulation, rather than saying, like, you know, like, like, can you disprove the possibility that you're not just a brain in a vat? You know, how far can you take doubt? And the whole point of it is to say that, like, just because something is doubtable doesn't mean that it's not true, and that it shouldn't be treated as true. We should take a fallibilistic approach to knowledge. So yeah, that's how I'd kind of respond to that. Oh, that's the guy who came up with the simulation argument. Oh, well, that's fair enough, right? I know the I really just know it as an abstraction from, like, Descartes. That just mean that would be my ignorance. But thank you there, question mark. Oh, it's Nick Liston. I think that's on Discord. That's fine. But yeah, like, someone was asking, like, whether, like, before with the course, like, you know, I've had many students. Like, I've got a few waiting. Oh dear Lord. I'm really looking forward to, like, just getting people's, like, responses to the course. Like, I'm still producing it, and, like, really interested to see how people are going to react to, like, the lectures and stuff. I'm really looking forward to, like, engaging people in philosophy that they've probably never heard of before, or, like, engage with, like, before, like, talking about, like, Heraclitus and Parmenides, for example, like pre-Socratics, you know, talking about, like, the Enlightenment and, you know, like, medieval thinkers like Duns Scotus and stuff. So yeah, it'll be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to, like, engaging people with that sort of stuff. A conversation on topics you disagree with on moral philosophy with Cosmic Skeptic, or Ask Yourself, maybe. Well, I'm certainly not going to be talking to Ask Yourself anytime soon, I don't believe, because we're on like good terms, and, like, that'll most likely, like, fall if we start talking too much. I'd love to talk to, like, one of the things I was going to talk to Rationality Rules about when we were talking about when I saw him when I was down in Oxford, is, like, talking about, like, maybe something about, like, nihilism and Jordan Peterson at some point, and, like, postmodern neo-Marxism and stuff. I haven't really heard from Rationality Rules in a while, so, and oh dear Lord, and obviously I think I do want to talk to Alex at some point about what's it called, like whether it's okay to kill an animal like painlessly and stuff like that. Like, I just want to make him very well aware that it's not. But like, obviously me and Alex just have meta-ethical like differences, but he's vegan and stuff, and his applied ethics is pretty much similar to mine. So he's just a psychological egoist, I think he calls himself, which I think is not, oh Jesus, which is not a good system to, you know, engage within, but whatever. It's like nothing, like, don't get, oh dear Lord, I can do this, right. But yeah, like overall, like there's more similarities between like me and, like, I would say like I definitely have more respect for like Cosmic Skeptic's view of like pretty much like ethics and stuff than I have most. I think he has a overall like quite developed framework and stuff. I'm gonna shoot off in a second, guys. I'm gonna go and get something to eat. Is a square circle possible? In non-Euclidean geometry, I do believe it is. Right. That's, I think, me done for this stream, guys. Yeah, if you would like to support the channel in any way, hit the donation link below. You can tip and stuff like that, or you can purchase the course. In case anyone's interested in obviously understanding what the course is going to be about, it's going to be an introduction to Western philosophy, where I take you through all the major thinkers throughout time. It's going to be, I want to give people a really good education on philosophy, but you know, with an approach which shows the development of thought. So I'm going to take you through every major field, but like from the ancient Greeks all the way to the contemporaries, you know, ancient Greeks, medieval, Enlightenment, and then contemporary thinkers. So yeah, we'll be talking through like very many different theories in there and different thinkers, and a very thinker-based approach as well, guys. I'm gonna teach us thinkers primarily, like theories and thinkers, but primarily thinkers, because that's how I was taught at university, and I think it's a really good way to approach philosophy. I don't have a Patreon. I'll be interested in whether if anyone would be interested in like obviously subscribing to a Patreon. I've been thinking about setting one up, to be honest. But yeah, just to support the channel and ultimately lead to like, you know, a greater overall content. Like one of the next things I want to get, even in terms of like hardware, is like a cam link, so I can improve the quality of the stream, so you can see me. That's my dog knocking the Christmas tree. In even greater detail, you'll see the very pores on my face, and then you'll stop asking about my skin routine. Yeah. And then I think on top of that, like obviously I'm just trying, the reason that like I made the course is just so like I want to give a high quality product at a good price in order to like engage people in philosophy without them having to pay like £9,000 a year, which I think is like, just ridiculous. Thank you very much, Wicked Fatigue, for your donation. I really appreciate it. Did you see Vegan Foot Soldier's debate on is philosophy a pyramid scheme on Arthuria's debate channel? How would you respond to that? I haven't seen the debate. I should probably check it out. Like I was gonna go on Arthuria and like have some debates. If you're interested in seeing more debates, let us know. Because there's some there's some things that like I just would be interested in discussing. Obviously I debated Foot Soldier last time. It gets mixed reviews on transgenderism and whether it's absurd. Many people like a lot of people like judged it without even watching it. Like I've been called transphobic a few times, and then I'm making like hateful comments. So one guy I apologized to, is actually, he's like, oh right, I actually didn't like, you know, I didn't engage with it like, well, I wasn't having a good day. They just saw the title and then in the comments saw us defending Blair White and were like, this guy must be transphobic. And it's like, no man, I'm actually arguing for transgender people. Please. But yeah, do you have any books or resources you could recommend to get into pre-Socratics? There is actually one book, but I'll have to like search it out. Like I can't remember what it's called. But even like in the recommended reading, like, you know, that like classic readings, Parmenides and Heraclitus are both in there. So they're like two of the biggest pre-Socratic thinkers. And I would recommend that book. It's really great. And they actually draw from another book that I was going to recommend, and I can't remember its name for the life of us. But yeah, the pre-Socratic thinkers are interesting. Although the only ones I really care about are Parmenides and and Heraclitus. The rest of them, like, they're not really of an interest to us so much. But Heraclitus especially. Well, actually, I don't know. Parmenides, the grandfather of, as he's called, of metaphysics. Very interesting stuff. Bertrand Russell commented on his work. Really interesting stuff. People argue for like modal, even modal interpretations of him. He's and he was writing in a poem, so it just makes it just seems so much more interesting. I mean, like, they're talking about like the night goddess and so on like that, like, ancient Greek mythology mixed with philosophy, and it's just sexy. It's just so nice. So yeah, I'm down to support the channel on the way through Patreon. I'm sure a few people others would too. I don't think it costs you anything, so let us know if you sign up and I'll join. Oh, well, that's really nice, Mark. I really appreciate that. I'll go and make a Patreon. I really appreciate the support. And yeah, like, obviously I'll probably like make Discord roles and stuff like that, so like people who do support like get something back. I hate the idea of taking without like giving something back. One of the reasons why I like the whole donation thing is that at least then I can like answer a question and provide a service as well, and I hope that like obviously you do get the benefit of like me knowledge and experience in me streams and in me content. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching. I'm going to shoot off now, and I hope everyone has a very Merry Christmas. I'll see you all tomorrow, and as always, try to gain some perspective.